Kenya is a beautiful East African nation that harbors some of the most amazing wildlife and landscape in the world. Kenya is home to Lake Victoria, the second largest freshwater source in the world and the largest lake in Africa. It is also home to the famous Kora National Park, the home to many of Africa's remaining exotic and rare wildlife. However, our main focus today isn't on the beauty of Kenya's wildlife or landscape. Today we are uncovering the mystery behind why Kenya is so wealthy. To fully grasp the extent of Kenya's wealth, we have to consider every single sector in the country. From its demographics to its economy, its healthcare and education, and not to mention tourism. Kenya is both home to a unique group of African people with three primary language groups. They are the Bantu, Nilo Sahara, and the Afro-Asiatic. It is home to groups of immigrated Asians, like the people from India and Pakistan, who immigrated during the British colonial rule period. The most widely spread language in Kenya is Swahili, which is a language that can be described as what happens when Arabs and the African people have a baby. The Arabs first settled in Kenya in the 8th century and used the opportunity to introduce Islam to the locals. However, more than 75% of Kenyans today are Christian. Kenya's population skyrocketed from the early 1960s to the early 1980s, which seriously constrained the country's social and economic development. During the first quarter of the 20th century, the total population was fewer than 4 million, largely because of famines, wars, and diseases. By the late 1940s, the population stood at more than 5 million, then 8 million by the 1970s. The population then skyrocketed to more than 20 million by the mid-80s. Kenya's population then started to drop steadily due to high unemployment, rising cost of education, poor health services, and limited food imports. So how did Kenya pull itself out of poverty and stagnation to become one of Africa's most wealthy nations? Well, since Kenya achieved independence in 1963, its economy has contained both private and state-owned enterprises. Most of the country's businesses are in private hands, implying a huge amount of foreign investment. However, the government also shapes the country's economic development through various regulatory powers and parastatals or enterprises that it partly or wholly owns. The aim of this policy is to achieve economic growth and stability, generate employment, and maximize foreign earnings by achieving high levels of agricultural exports while substituting domestically produced goods for those that have been imported. For a decade after independence, this policy showed great promise through rising wages, employment, and government revenue. This has also provided the means for expanding health services, education, transportation, and communication sectors. But problems that arose with the rise of global oil prices in 1973 have been aggravated by periodic drought and accelerating population growth, and Kenya's economy has been unable to maintain a favorable balance of trade while addressing the problems of chronic poverty and growing unemployment. The country's ability to industrialize has been hampered by, among other factors, limited domestic purchasing power, shrinking government budgets, increased external and internal debt, poor infrastructure, and massive governmental corruption and mismanagement. In an effort to decrease its dependence on volatile agricultural markets, Kenya attempted to diversify its exports in the last decade of the 20th century, adding horticultural products, clothing, cement, soda ash, and fluorspar. The country also made the export of manufactured goods, such as paper and vehicles, a priority. Domestic restrictions on imports have been removed slowly, however, and this policy has been only partially successful. Kenya's economy, which did not grow at a constant rate during the last 2 decades of the 20th century, continued to be dominated by the external market. Tourism and agricultural exports were still the major source of foreign exchange for the country in the early 21st century. Agriculture equally plays an important role in Kenya's economy. Although its share of the overall GDP has declined from 2/5 in 1964 to less than 1/5 in the early 21st century. Agriculture supplies the manufacturing sector with raw materials and generates tax revenue and foreign exchange, which supports the rest of the economy. Moreover, it employs a majority of the population. In the first years after independence, the government sought to redistribute the land on which most of the agricultural exports were produced. Although there are now thousands of large farms, ranches, and major plantations, the majority of the farms are smaller than 5 acres. Tea and fresh flowers are the key foreign exchange earners. Sisal, cotton, and fruits and vegetables also are important cash crops. Coffee, historically an important foreign exchange earner, still contributes to the economy but began declining in importance and earnings in the 1990s, owing in part to market instability and deregulation. Kenya supplies the majority of the pyrethrum to the world market. Pyrethrum is a flower used to create the non-synthetic pesticide, pyrethrin. The demand for this product fluctuates depending upon the level of interest in the United States, which is the largest consumer of this commodity. National boards that controlled key export crops such as coffee, tea, and cotton were deregulated beginning in the early 1990s. The major crops for domestic consumption are corn and wheat. Sugarcane was an export crop in the 1970s and 80s, but by the 90s domestic demand exceeded the supply and it had to be imported. Livestock, including cattle and goats, is raised and dairy goods are produced primarily for domestic use. Also, the government maintains a reserve supply of such commodities as skim milk powder, cheese, and butter. Surplus animal and dairy products are exported. Despite the importance of agriculture to the economic well-being of the country, the lack of water, infrastructure, and arable land seriously constrain further expansion. Less than 1/10 of Kenya can be used for agriculture. Although the government has made efforts to increase irrigation, it is estimated that only 1/5 to 1/4 of potentially irrigatable area has been developed. Forests occupy only a small portion of the land, but are extremely important in the domestic economy. Most of the area of forest reserves is wooded bush, bamboo, and grass. The remainder consists of planted softwoods, which now support a domestic paper industry. Forests are vital for conserving Kenya's soil and water resources, but they are increasingly threatened by a fast-growing population that constantly demands more fuel wood and settlement areas. As fuel wood is used primarily for domestic cooking, but deforestation threatens the supply. A tree planting program has been initiated to grow quick-maturing indigenous and exotic species in ecologically suitable areas. Fish and marine products represent a small but growing portion of Kenya's economy and are locally important. Freshwater fish from Lakes Victoria and Rudolph constitute the bulk of the catch. The encroaching water on the surface of Lake Victoria threatened this fishery in the 1990s, although this nuisance was countered by several strategies, including the introduction of weevils into the environment. Most of the weed have been successfully eliminated, although the potential for a resurgence remains. Soda ash, which is used in glassmaking, is Kenya's most valuable mineral export and is quarried at Lake Magadi in the Rift Valley. Limestone deposits at the coast and in the interior are exploited for cement manufacture and agriculture. Vermiculite, gold, rubies, topazes, and salt are also important, as is fluorite, also known as fluorspar, and used in metallurgy, which is mined along the Kerio River in the north. Deposits of titanium and zirconium-bearing sands were found in multiple locations northeast of Mombasa and to the south of the city. Exploration for petroleum has so far met with limited resources. Kenya's economic development has been tied to its ability to improve energy resources. The emphasis since independence has been on producing hydroelectricity, but access to energy is limited to rural areas, since the bulk of electricity is consumed by the two major urban centers of Nairobi and Mombasa. There are hydroelectric plants located on the Tana and Turkle rivers. Geothermal resources in the Rift Valley have been tapped since the early 1980s to generate electricity and have come to supply a significant amount of Nairobi's total needs. While the expansion of the generating capacity continued through grants from the IMF and the World Bank. Kenya is the most industrially developed country in East Africa, but it has not yet produced results to match its potential. Manufacturing is based largely on processing imported goods, although the government supports the development of export-oriented industries. Major industries include agricultural processing, publishing and printing, and the manufacture of textiles and clothing, cement, tires, batteries, paper, ceramics, and leather goods. Assembly plants, which utilize imported parts, produce various kinds of commercial and passenger vehicles, and even export a small quantity to other African countries such as Uganda, Tanzania, Rwanda, and Burundi. Steel processing for re-export and for the construction industry is a growing sector, with about a dozen steel mills in operation. The petroleum industry, which was deregulated in 1994, produces diesel and jet fuel from imported crude oil at a refinery near Mombasa and provides a major source of foreign exchange. The state-run Central Bank of Kenya, established by legislation in 1966, regulates the money supply, assists in the development of the monetary, credit, and banking system, acts as a banker and financial advisor to the government, and grants short-term or seasonal loans. There is also a large number of commercial, merchant, and foreign banks in Kenya. The Nairobi Stock Exchange, founded in 1954, is one of the largest in sub-Saharan Africa. Agricultural products such as tea, fresh flowers, fruits and vegetables, and coffee constitute the greatest proportion of Kenya's exports. The remainder of the exports consists of petroleum products, cement, hides and skins, and soda ash. Imports include machinery and transport equipment, chemical products, petroleum and petroleum products, and food and beverages. Among Kenya's chief trading partners are India, China, Uganda, and Tanzania. Kenya is a member of the East African Community Customs Union. Kenya is home to some of the rarest and most interesting species of wildlife in the world. Because of this, tourism is one of the country's major sources of foreign exchange, with visitors coming largely from countries of the European Union and the United States of America. Tourism revolves around a basic framework of national parks, game reserves, and game sanctuaries, where a wide variety of animals and cultural attractions can be enjoyed. The number of tourists began to vary annually in the early 1990s, however, following a period of political unrest and attacks on tourists, and again in the early 2000s, owing partially to the threat of terrorism. Following agriculture, the next largest employment sectors are the trade and service-related industries. Women perform most of the agricultural work, but they participate largely in the informal sector of the economy. The Central Organization of Trade Unions was founded in 1965. Many professions are unionized, including metal workers, airline pilots, game hunting and safari workers, jockeys and betting workers, journalists, and textile workers. Government revenue is derived from taxes on income and profits and on goods and services, from excise duties, and from value-added taxes. Together with improved housing, education, sanitation, and nutrition, healthcare programs have drastically reduced mortality rates from the pre-independence levels, especially for infants. High rates of malaria, gastroenteritis, diarrhea, and dysentery, trachoma, amoebiasis, and schistosomiasis continue, however, and illustrate how difficult it is to eradicate mosquitoes and provide clean water, especially in the countryside. By the beginning of the 21st century, AIDS had become the major disease in Kenya and threatened to reverse the declining death rate. Kenya, like other countries in Africa suffering under the AIDS pandemic, has utilized a number of strategies to combat the disease, including drug therapy. Some drug companies lowered their prices in Kenya by more than half in the early 21st century, but this was not enough to make drugs available to all who needed them. Inadequate supply of drugs is also a problem. Kenyatta National Hospital in Nairobi is the country's chief referral and teaching institution, and there are also provincial and district hospitals. In rural areas, health centers and dispensaries offer diagnostic services, obstetric care, and outpatient treatment, although they often lack adequate facilities, trained personnel, and medications. In rural areas, the average home consists of a two-room dwelling made with wood siding and a roof of sheet iron. For the very poor, simple grass-thatched huts are typical. In urban areas, the representative middle-class home has 2 bedrooms, indoor plumbing, a kitchen, and a living area. Providing housing for the urban poor has been increasingly difficult since independence. Most of the urban population lives in informal housing areas not recognized by the government, which often raises slums without warning. In an effort to provide better quality affordable housing, new building materials are being developed. One such product is brick made from a combination of water, soil, and a small amount of cement. Kenya is undoubtedly the very rich, and despite all the natural amenities, its wealth is truly in its people, the unflinching, unflustered, and determined Kenyans that strive for excellence and a better Kenya for everyone. This is the secret. There is no raw material, no amount of mineral resource or gem can replace the value of the people that inhabit an area. And that's the most important thing here. It is all about the people. So, in a nutshell, Kenya has so many advantages, and despite its dark, gloomy past, there is a shadow of hope on the horizon. A bright future awaits, and only normal, everyday Kenyans are going to forge that path. Thanks for watching. If you are still unsubscribed, please remember to hit the subscribe button and officially be a member of our community here at The New Tourist. See you in our next video.